Again, good morning and welcome to our special guest this morning. It was a real treat to have all of you with us as we celebrate as a wider community on this Remembrance Sunday. I have a confession to make that I've always been a little unsure of how we do Remembrance Day on Remembrance Sunday in the life of the church. I've always been a little uneasy about how we reconcile these things and how we do it well. And a disclaimer in that is that I'm a Canadian who's been known to spend many a Remembrance Day at the cenotaph, singing our national anthem and remembering with a heavy heart those who died in service of our country. And so it's not that I take objection to Remembrance Day. I've just often wondered how exactly we reconcile it in church. Because I've seen it done badly. I've seen it done where militarism is at the center of what's happening, or triumphalism, or even tribalism. And so, as a Christian community, as we remember today, I think it's really important to ask the question, what's different, or what should be different about how we honor Remembrance Sunday in the life of the church? And I think that begins with a really important question. What does love look like? That word love that is often ill-defined and thrown around in ways that we might not want it to. That word love that is shared between mothers and children, that's shared between friends, it's shared between me and my slice of pizza as well. It's a word that gets used in a lot of different ways. So I think it's really important to ask ourselves this question around love on this day of all days. I think for many of you scouts and beavers and cubs, your parents will understand this word love in a very particular way. In a way that's probably quite true to the way that Jesus uses the word love, in a sacrificial way. In a way that chooses to give up things so that you might not go with them. I know as a dad myself of a 3-year-old boy, the love I have for my son is one that empties of me to give to him. I was watching the other day on my Facebook feed. I saw a video from a few decades ago. It was a video of a man named Derek Redmond, who was a sprinter for Great Britain in the Olympics. He had set the world record in the 1980s, and at the 1992 Barcelona Olympics was set to win another gold medal again. And in the 400-meter competition, about 100 meters into the race, everyone was shocked as he fell to the ground. The muscle at the back of his right leg, his hamstring, had torn quite dramatically, and he couldn't walk or run. He got himself up, trying to keep going, but fell down again. Got up again, hopping and dragging his leg behind him. And I imagine many who watched with heartache in their chest. And from the gallery, from the stands, came running a man onto the field, onto the track. And many of the Olympic officials were trying to grab him and stop him until they realized it was his father trying to make his way out to the track. And although they knew he would be disqualified for any assistance that he would get, his father placed one arm of his over his shoulder. And with tears in both their eyes, he got him across the finish line. I think that's how many parents think of how they love each one of you, all of their children. That in their suffering, they would never want them to be alone. And that kind of love, I hope, is expected from a parent. I hope that kind of love is not abnormal in this world. But then there's the kind of love that's not expected. That maybe is beyond the parental expression. A friend of mine this week who is a teacher in Tennessee witnessed throughout the week some pretty troubling things at recess. A group of kids, not much older than you scouts, started picking on a kid of a different color at recess. Started chanting things like "build the wall" and "go back where you came from." Recess after recess this week, a little boy of a different color of skin was made to feel as though he had no place at their school. And yet on Friday, as the weekend approached and the final session of recess came, as a group of kids who were scout age were picking on a kid who was a cub, the rest of the kids his age, 4 or 5 of them, who were much smaller than the bullies, came forward at recess and linked arms with him and just stared at the bullies as they shouted. The kind of love that is sacrificial, that might even be a little scary. Standing up for someone being picked on, left to the side. It's a kind of love that we should all aspire to. The kind of love I hope we share. Many of you will know about some of the horrors and devastation, the war-torn atrocities that are happening in the country of Syria right now. It doesn't take much than flipping on the television to hear just a little bit about it. And we hear lots about bombs and armies, horror and death. But I heard something this week that I had just never heard before. There's a group of people in Syria called the Syrian Civil Defense. By that name, you'd think they were an army seeking to destroy enemies in their land. But the Syrian Civil Defense, or as they've commonly become known as, the White Helmets, are an unarmed force that go into their homeland, into places like Aleppo and Mosul, and places where they risk their lives. And their only purpose is to save life. To pull children and babies out of destroyed buildings. To care for those who've been knocked down. And as one of the White Helmets said in an interview that I saw this week, even if it's an enemy, it's still a life. The White Helmets embody a kind of sacrificial love that offers to give their life in another's place. Jesus tells his disciples that there is no greater love than this: to give up one's life for one's friends. And I don't know about you, but I find that challenging, to say the least. You know, who is he to tell us that? As Jesus always does, he does not ask anything of anyone that he's not willing to do first. He's always willing to go before us. Jesus was born into poverty, in a stable where there was no room for him in the inn. He lived amongst outcasts and the marginalized, breaking bread with them and loving those who no one else would. He even spent time with bullies and transgressors. He spent time with those who we might like to just point our fingers and say, "Get out of here." And in the end, he was even willing to be counted among the transgressors. To be beaten, to be tried, and to be put to death. Jesus says that there is no greater love than to give up one's life for one's friends. And we know that because he did it first. So the thing is that I don't think that triumphalism can be the posture the church takes on Remembrance Day, counting all the wars that we've won. But instead, we remember on Remembrance Day and on Remembrance Sunday because we need to remember the kinds of things that would be too easy to forget. That there was darkness in the world 2,000 years ago when Jesus was crucified. There was darkness throughout many centuries since, and certainly in the 20th that saw the Great Wars. There's darkness even today. I think we know that too well. But as the Gospel of John tells us, that in Jesus, light shone in the darkness, and the darkness could not overcome it. So it's not what we've gained in victory, but what we've shared in our brokenness. It's not what we've won through triumph, but how together we've chosen sacrifice and often suffering. On Remembrance Day, on Remembrance Sunday, as we gather as church, we seek to show the character of the risen one. We seek to show the character of our Savior Christ. Because real love, it costs us everything. Sometimes even our life. So we put our faith in the one who gave his. We put our faith in Jesus Christ.